Mm. We're live.
We're live, huh?
Yeah.
Oh, I still hear Kulthum. Oh, is she gone?
I think so.
Okay, I think we'll start.
Okay.
Katie Bercegeay, let's start with where you were born.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Sure. I was born in Lafayette, Louisiana.
Lafayette?
Mm-hmm.
Are most names in Louisiana, the names of cities, are they more often French derived?
Many of them
Yeah.
are, for sure. Mm-hmm.
And Lafayette was, of course, Lafayette Square in DC has been in the news. Who was Lafayette? Who is Lafayette?
Lafayette was a Frenchman who fought on behalf of the United States during the American Revolution.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And do you know what compelled him to do that?
That's a great question. I think we should all watch Hamilton.
Okay, so Lafayette is in, okay, yeah. Have you seen Hamilton?
Unfortunately not, because we are unable to access Disney Plus here in Morocco.
Oh, okay, all right.
I've been watching clips here and there and listening to the soundtrack, though.
Mm-hmm. And did you grow up in Lafayette?
I actually grew up in a small town about half an hour south of Lafayette, a town called Ira, very small, maybe 2,500 people. It's where my mom's family is from, but then I also have family in Lafayette as well. It's where my paternal grandparents lived and where my dad grew up. Yeah.
In Lafayette.
Mm-hmm.
And so I guess that's also where the main hospital is, where people are born in that region. So, or did you have a hospital in that town you lived in?
Well,
you grew up in?
Yeah, Lafayette has several hospitals. It's probably, the city limits is probably like 150,000 people, and then there are lots of people in the surrounding area too. But yeah, Lafayette has several hospitals. There isn't currently a hospital in my hometown, my small town. There is another hospital closer by. I wasn't born there. My mom was actually born in a hospital in Iraq, but it doesn't exist anymore. So.
I see.
Yeah.
And so you said you lived in the town of 2,500. So is it a walkable town?
No. I mean, so here's the deal. I am technically not included in that 2,500 figure because I live in that area outside of city limits. So the downtown part is walkable, but where I live, maybe not quite as much. Yeah.
I see. And when you went to elementary school and middle school and so forth, was that in the town?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
So you took I guess a bus every day?
Yeah, I took a bus most of the time. And then, you know, the middle school and the high school are pretty much connected on the same campus. And my dad was a teacher at the high school. So sometimes if I wasn't late, I would catch a ride with him, but he's an early bird.
I see. Me, so and how long is that bus ride?
Oh, yeah. Well, the bus ride itself, it would probably take 30 minutes just because you're stopping and starting and, you know, zigzagging. Yeah. But yeah. I mean, a car ride, maybe 5 minutes.
5 minutes?
Yeah.
That's quite a, yeah, so it's really close.
Maybe 10 in like very dense traffic.
Yeah. So what do you see in that 5 minute or 30-minute drive? So what would that landscape look like?
Sugarcane fields.
All of it?
Rice fields, mostly sugarcane. Yeah, most of it.
Is, you know, my family spends a lot of their time upstate New York, and you could sort of know a lot about the year just by the height of the corn. Mm-hmm. And so what's your favorite part of the year? When do sugarcane look most beautiful? Is there a beautiful point in their growth, or?
When is its tallest? You know, I'm so ashamed to admit. When is harvest? There is a certain point where it's tallest and it's most beautiful, and I think that's during the summer. Oh my God, don't quote me. I haven't lived in Louisiana in several years. But, and as a kid, I don't know that I paid attention to the seasons as much, you know. But as far as the time that I feel kind of aware and affinity for it is when they're actually harvesting and they burn the cane, and it kind of infiltrates the air in probably a way that's not very good for the atmosphere, but it smells sweet. And
it smells sweet. Wow.
Fall or winter. Yeah.
Wow. Did you have lunch at school every day?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I did.
And you did, and this was the routine through high school?
Yeah, K through 12. K through 12 every day. You know, I grew up with the same people. There was only one time in middle school where another elementary school merged in with us. They didn't have junior high and high school, but other than that, same people, K through 12. And yeah.
Was there a student that took that bus with you from early elementary all the way through high school? The same bus, the same line as you?
Oh yeah, you know, there were several. So I lived in this kind of subdivision, and there were several kids in my neighborhood who were kind of like my best friends, and they were all my age. We all graduated together. We all started school together, graduated together. There were maybe 5 of us, all in the same class. And yeah, we always took the bus together, and we would, you know, it was that kind of community where people would just show up and knock on people's doors. It was like very much open door policy at that time, kind of between us, friends, neighbors. I don't know if it's the same anymore necessarily, but yeah, very small town. Everybody knows everybody. Over
what was the feeling, the emotional feeling at high school graduation, knowing that such a huge aspect of your life is coming to closure?
So it may have been the one time that I finished something big that I didn't cry. I don't remember crying at it, which is ironic because that's where I've spent most of my life. But I come from a family of criers. My mom's a crier and her parents are both criers. So I remember my grandpa just bawling at my high school graduation. But I wasn't that. I had a lot of senioritis. So I was really ready for college. So I always thought my friends and I would always be best friends. I didn't think of it as a separation by any means. Just, you know, a time to new opportunities.
And where did you go on to college?
Down the road in Lafayette.
Bus?
University of Louisiana at Lafayette. Yeah. And yeah, it was good. I spent a really great 4 years there. I made a lot of new friends. I kind of started to become myself even more. And yeah, it was wonderful. It was close to home, lots of pride. And yeah.
And what was your major? What was the last thing you said?
Oh, I said, and I'm not in debt.
Well, that's a big one.
Yeah.
Yeah. We should explore that. I mean, because that really says a lot. That's what motivated me to go to the University of New Mexico, because I started my PhD at Tufts at the Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy. And for whatever reason, I made my way to New Mexico, and I wanted to be in a place where they wanted you to be, you know, where they needed you to be. They didn't need me at Tufts. Anyway, but so what was your major?
English.
English. Did you know that going in?
Did I know that going in?
Yeah.
Sorry. You know, I actually wanted to study international studies, international something, and had planned to do that at a different university, also in Louisiana. And then I ended up not, and a similar program didn't exist at the University of Louisiana. And so I was going to go in undeclared, and at the last, I was exploring options for modern languages, so either to major in Spanish or French. Arabic was not an option at school. And at the last minute, I decided English. I don't really know why. I liked writing, and I did well in English in high school. So I said, I'll do this for now and change it later if I want. And then I just never changed it, but it worked out.
What are some of the biggest impressions that you carried afterwards, or that you remember now about that major, about that study? I mean, is it the books that you've read, or is it the things that you wrote, or the professors that you had? What's the biggest takeaway from your English major?
From my English major specifically, well, my degree was kind of it was English, but it felt very interdisciplinary. And so, I mean, of course, I took out of it a lot of the writing. I took a variety of writing. I took a variety of creative writing. I took like short film screenwriting, feature-length screenwriting. Folklore is actually included in English. So I took American and Louisianan folklore, which was really important to me. And so, it's really interesting because for that folklore class, we were given two assignments, like a short collection assignment and a long collection assignment. And for the short one, I basically interviewed my now late grandmother about a family recipe, oyster dressing, which is a delicacy now. It might sound weird, but it was something that my grandma would make every Christmas, and only once a year, only at Christmas. And it was something her mom had made and had been passed down for generations. So I actually found that project just a few weeks ago. I was thinking about my grandmother. She just passed away last summer, and thought, I want to see if I can find that paper. It's horribly written, but the research was really fun.
So in that ingredient, of course, they're oysters. What's another main ingredient in that dressing?
Well, I never actually attempted to make it, but bread, stale bread.
So bread's in the dressing. So it's like croutonish?
Mm-hmm. Croutonish, Parmesan cheese.
You put the dressing on oysters?
No, the oysters are in the dressing.
In the dressing, so it'd be like on salad or...
It's this, this small casserole, and you just eat a little bit of it because oysters are expensive these days. They were really cheap whenever I assume my ancestors first arrived in Louisiana, like a mud, something you find in the mud. But now it's a delicacy.
So you mentioned there was also a larger folklore assignment. When I think of Louisiana, and I'm a New York City, I guess mostly, and I'm not sure. I'm not sure where I would go if I had to try to discover folklore based on where I am. But it seems to me that folklore would be strong in Louisiana. Did your larger assignment also focus on a folklore within the state of Louisiana or within the family?
So no, it focused on local folklore, but not necessarily something cultural. It more so focused on, so there is this international music festival that we host in Lafayette every single year. I was actually going to go home for it this year, but then with COVID and quarantine, I wasn't able to go home. Excuse me. But it's been going on. This would have been the 31st or 32nd year that it's been going on, 5 days completely free, paid for through sponsorships and donations. And it initially started as kind of a Francophone festival, because Louisiana itself is Francophone, but it was also a way to kind of bring in other artists to share culture from other Francophone regions of the world in Louisiana, and specifically in Lafayette, and also to share like our very unique culture with other parts of the Francophone world who were coming to visit. And it still definitely is that. It's probably still maybe 70, 80% that. But in the last, I don't know, however many years, it's also started inviting artists from South America, other parts of Africa that aren't necessarily Francophone, the Middle East, just kind of from everywhere. So, but I haven't been in about 6 years. So I'd love to go back at some point, but I don't necessarily remember the specifics of the details of the project, but I think I interviewed some of the founders for it and people on the street and what they're like.
When you mentioned going to college at Lafayette and the fact that you went to Lafayette and, you use the word pride in there, or I think I heard the word pride.
You did.
And and yet so much or an important part of your post life after this has been international. Was there a feeling of unsettlement as you lived your life in Louisiana? Was there this desire to go beyond? There was pride in Louisiana. You were happy you stayed there for college, and yet you're in Fez right now. And so what was the feeling while still in Louisiana that you recognize that now that may have propelled you to go beyond Louisiana?
I always knew there was more to learn and be seen in other places. I have been interested in studying elsewhere. I studied abroad twice for short stints. I studied in France and I studied in Chile for my master's. And I was always interested in learning about other places and people, and that was kind of solidified as well during college. I was really involved. It's interesting that you asked about what a lot of my takeaways from my English degree was, but if you ask some of my friends from college, they wouldn't have known what my major was. They would have told you I majored in extracurricular. I was really involved in extracurricular activities, and I had a real, I don't know, kind of affinity for our very small international student population, and when I had free time, would go to like international coffee hours on Friday afternoons. And
I see.
My first full-time job after my master's degree was back at the International Students Office teaching English. And I just always felt like I wanted to see other places. Yeah.
What did you do immediately after your undergraduate degree?
I got my master's.
So was that also at Lafayette?
It was in Stillwater, Oklahoma.
And what drew you there? What made you apply to that school, and what made you accept and go? And what was your graduate degree in?
Sure. So I earned a Master's of Science in International Studies with a focus on human development, society, and education. It's really a mouthful of a degree. And it was a short interdisciplinary program. I found the program through the Peace Corps website, actually. This was when Peace Corps still was actively promoting and implementing the Masters International program. I'm not sure if you're familiar, Yossef, but it was, a program where you studied, you took your academic courses over the span of a year, and then you do your Peace Corps service, come back, write your thesis or your creative component or whatever not, and
yes,
your master's degree. And
there
were two women in my cohort in my stage in Morocco who I think were part of the last of that program before it was kind of phased out. So that's how I found the program. I didn't necessarily have any background in economics or international relations, so it seemed disciplinary enough for me to kind of fix the schedule around emergency management, gender, Middle East, nutrition. It was just kind of another kind of hodgepodge interdisciplinary degree, which was great. It changed my life a little bit. It was also affordable. I obviously didn't do Peace Corps at that time. I ended up just getting the master's. But I did Peace Corps eventually.
And so did you graduate? Was your undergraduate degree received in May or June, and then you started that September, your graduate degree in Oklahoma?
Graduated in May, moved in August.
In August. And what was the landscape like in Oklahoma? And what was the like? Dry?
Dusty.
Dusty?
It was a small town. Stillwater is a small town. It's Oklahoma State University. I was there for 9.5 months, and I met some good friends who are still my friends today. We've, over quarantine, we've had video calls once a month. Most of them left to do Peace Corps after the year. Most of them are also married with homes now. So.
Did anything about Oklahoma sort of in the natural environment, culturally, remind you of Louisiana, of where you grew up?
No, not really. I mean, they're both, there are similar aspects culturally, but I was, I think, surrounded by people who weren't necessarily from Oklahoma, or maybe they were. My life in Oklahoma was very much, I did not very many things. I studied. I was the most nervous I've ever been. I was constantly consumed with, I need to learn this. It was a constant me catching up because I had this humanities degree and I'm getting this social sciences degree,
Yeah.
which I love and I prefer even, but it felt like a big game of catch up, which was worth it because I got outstanding graduate. Because I had to work that much harder than I feel like my classmates did because I felt like I came in with this like, just like not knowing enough about the world, which is why I decided not to do Peace Corps at the time. I just felt like, wow, what kind of difference can I possibly make in the world right now? But Oklahoma was great. I spent my time either studying in class at the library where I had a research assistantship or at the gym or with my friends. So that was about it. There wasn't many other places you would find.
And so what did you do immediately after that 9.5 months you were there?
So I actually finished my coursework in Valparaiso, Chile over that summer. So May through July. And it was wonderful. It was very cold because it was winter there on the Pacific coast, but it was great. And then I immediately moved back to Louisiana and got a teaching job at my university. Yeah.
The university you studied at Lafayette? What was the feeling? So you go to Oklahoma, which is and then it's an international experience because of the study and the people, and then you go to Costa Rica, obviously clearly an international experience, and then you go back to Lafayette. What was that feeling of going back to Lafayette after having these sort of out there experiences?
Well, it was a bit challenging. I mean, there was a reason I only stayed in Louisiana for about a year once I moved back before I left, and I've never moved back since then. I was grateful to have one of the most interesting jobs I could have had, or one of the most challenging. I was teaching English as a first-time teacher in a remedial intensive English program. My students were from all over the world. They needed to boost up their English level to be admitted to academic programs at the university. Very intensive, very stressful. But at least I got to learn a lot through them. And I was very avid about having them feel comfortable. Also in Lafayette, I told you, like, feel so much pride there. And that's not necessarily something you see if you're coming from outside. It's something so deep and, below the surface. And I wanted them to, I don't know, understand they were in a special place, because otherwise it could be like, oh, this is such a boring place to live. I could live in San Francisco or New York City or Washington. Why am I in a small town, Louisiana?
So. I had a first interview with Mark Appel, and there was a period in his life where he had done all these things and then ended up right where he started, and trying to get traction again to move on. I think one of the and so you had this job, but yet there was this. It seemed like it wasn't necessarily an easy period, and you were looking to move on. Is that fair to say?
Accurate.
Yeah. And so my question is, and I recognize that too. It's like you have these, you have this will to go somewhere. You've had a taste of it, and you just want to get back out there because you're not quite settled from where we've been for so long. And so, what advice or what can you tell someone to help them in those moments of where they they know they're not where they ought to be or really want to be. They've had senses of where there could be greater satisfaction, but we're dealing with time in order to get to that next place. What helps us deal with that time until we do move on?
I think you and I talk about patience a whole lot, but also like not to patience with yourself and patience with time, obviously, but also, keeping it in the back of your mind, like this is where you want to be. It will could eventually manifest itself, if you're really dedicated to it, and also assuming there aren't, other factors in your life necessarily, I don't want to say holding you back, that's a negative connotation, but sometimes there are things in our lives that keep us from progressing on the trajectory or the timeline that we necessarily want to be, and that's okay, and that's normal, and we're all human, and that's just how life unfolds. So it's good to be patient. I feel like I have a couple of things I want to say, and one is that it's never too late to get to where you want to go. And even if you're in a place that doesn't necessarily feel satisfying or like you're doing something worthy, there's always a next step you can take whenever the time is right. I remember talking to someone in my mid-20s-ish about applying for a humanitarian fellowship that's pretty well known, like a development humanitarian fellowship that's pretty well known, and saying, like, what if my plan were to apply either now or to do Peace Corps and then apply? And I remember this person who had been a fellow several decades ago said, "You're too old for that." And I was maybe 25, 26, and I said, "Excuse me?" I'm sorry.
Oh my God, can you imagine how much trouble the rest of us are in?
I know.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, I don't think I've wasted my life. I feel like every step I've taken has been pretty deliberate and interesting. And
what was the second thing? You said there were two things.
Probably something along those lines. Just just try. Just go for it. Just I remember, being at a place, and whenever you're, for example, looking at jobs that maybe you might aspire to someday, but you're very much not qualified, like I would just spend time looking at the qualifications. What are they and how can I get them? Which is maybe a very boring hobby to have. But,
and so what was that next step you took after that year back at Lafayette?
So I joined AmeriCorps, but not the AmeriCorps that people think of when they think of AmeriCorps. I joined AmeriCorps as kind of a staff person at an NGO, which is a large international humanitarian organization that works with refugees. And I was specifically working in a field office in the US doing refugee resettlement. I ended up staying there for 3 years because I loved it so much. And it was just a wonderful place to work. I felt like I had family and the staff there. I had moved, this was Charlottesville, where I managed UVA interns, like we are now as well.
That's right. Boy, small world.
I know. And I just loved my time there. I loved the staff. I loved the people we were working with. I loved the organization.
How long did you do that for?
3 years.
Well, that's quite a bit of time. Is there any point along this way, even before Costa Rica or still at Lafayette, or maybe, it sounds like your time in Charlottesville was quite satisfying, but is there any point along this where you're thinking, boy, I should have joined the Peace Corps back when I was in Oklahoma?
I was always envious of my friends who joined, but I also felt like I was the youngest of them, and just felt like I needed more life experience. And it wasn't until after Peace Corps that I thought, man, if I had done this sooner, then maybe I would have been more qualified for XYZ sooner. But then at the same time, I would have lost out on all of that other experience. Maybe my Peace Corps experience would have been less fulfilling. I don't know, because I'll never experience that as an early, 22-year-old now. But I was always really grateful to have waited, because I just loved my service. You know, I started at 27, which isn't really that old, but
no.
it feels older than 22 when you are 27.
Oh boy.
So,
yeah.
No, I was, no, it was difficult to leave kind of where I was previously to make this happen, but I also felt like it's something I've always wanted to do. I feel really ready for it, and if I don't do it now, will I ever do it?
Right. So the 3 years at AmeriCorps, did you go in knowing it's going to be 3 years?
No, it was 1 year at a time. And I wasn't an AmeriCorps the whole time. They eventually hired me on as full-time staff.
Okay.
So, but I have been
that's quite an achievement, that you come in as an AmeriCorps volunteer and then you're, brought on as part of their permanent team, I guess.
Yeah.
Did you go to?
I really loved that position. It was diverse. It was coordinating donations, volunteers, external relations.
And is that when you worked with migrant communities?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they were mostly refugees from Afghanistan, Iraq, Burma, Bhutan, Congo, DR Congo, Colombia, and a few other places.
And following that is when you joined the Peace Corps?
Mm-hmm.
So, what's amazing, just of course, maybe I hope it just may be me and you talking and only hearing each other. They may be no one.
If there are comments, we have no idea.
Okay, but let me just say this, Katie. So as a, I don't know, disclaimer, but of course we're colleagues at the High Atlas Foundation.
Right.
And you manage the legal aid program at FES right now, supported by the National Endowment for Democracy. But would you have ever, would you have had that position if you had gone straight into Peace Corps from Oklahoma? And now hearing the sort of arc of your story, I mean, I knew things along the way, but maybe not to this sort of chronology and detail. And I guess my point is that we need, at the High Atlas Foundation, we needed every step you're talking about. We needed the great writer that you are. We needed the international point of view that you have. We needed the understanding of migrant communities and their needs and how to be of best service to them. We needed the great professional that you are. And I'm not sure, at 21, 22, we'd be talking right now. You know what I mean? If you didn't have all of these years of important experiences, did that ever occur to you?
Sure. I mean, I think I feel a lot more confident in various areas now after all of this time. I mean, after, I had my year of teaching, I felt significantly more comfortable as a facilitator than I did previously. After, my stints at IRC, I felt more confident about a lot of things, but especially about how to work in a nonprofit environment with kind of a diverse staff. But then, of course, like working in Morocco is a completely different experience, and I was really eager to join Peace Corps as well because I don't know, I wanted to feel that sounds, so privileged of me, feel like what it felt like to be the foreigner. I'd like to.
So you applied for Peace Corps your third year, or around starting your third year at the nonprofit position in Charlottesville, I guess. Mm-hmm. And was there so you didn't feel ready in Oklahoma. You didn't quite feel ready. You're not feeling ready. And then is there a moment where suddenly you say, you know what, I'm ready? I mean, what made you feel like, okay, now I can apply, and if I'm invited, I can accept that invitation to go? What made you cross that threshold?
It wasn't so clear cut as that, actually, because at that point in time, I really didn't know if I wanted to quit my good job to join Peace Corps. It would be the second time I quit a full-time job to basically be a volunteer. But they were both like two of the best decisions I've ever made in my personal and professional life. You know, to join AmeriCorps and then to join Peace Corps. No regrets about either whatsoever. But it was also, you know, working. So I worked for the International Rescue Committee those 3 years, and a lot of my colleagues who were American had been Peace Corps volunteers. My boss had been a Peace Corps volunteer for 3 years in the former Zaire. Several of my colleagues had done Peace Corps, and a lot of the volunteers and interns at the University of Virginia were graduating each year. That I was helping to coordinate and supervise them and leaving and joining the Peace Corps. And I started to get a little envious of them. It's like, oh, I want to go out and have my own story.
Mm-hmm.
So eventually I just left with one of the UVA cohorts.
I see. So there are 2 points along this way when as you said, you left a full-time job to become a volunteer. Can you describe it sounds like a gradual decision-making process, but how do you are there similarities in the way you made those 2 decisions to join AmeriCorps and join the Peace Corps? How did you make those decisions to let go of, you know, relatively satisfying work experience, professional positions, to become a volunteer? How did you make those decisions?
I think it all mostly boils down to growth. I felt like I had become, like I was I don't want to say stagnant, but definitely the first time when I decided to leave Louisiana to join work with IRC as an AmeriCorps volunteer in Virginia, that was definitely, I'm ready for something new. I'm ready to get out of Louisiana again. And that there were a couple of different options I had, and I ended up going with that one for several reasons. IRC was an organization I had known about for years and felt really inspired by, and thought they would be a good, you know, a good way to learn a lot of things and a good place to put my energy and skills, and it worked out. And then the second time, it was more of kind of at a crux, you know, because I had never planned to stay in Charlottesville as long as I had. You know, I had always planned to move on, maybe internationally after my first or second year. I'll come back to that, actually. You'll think that's interesting. But I was at a place where I said, no, I have this like really good career. I've kind of landed in a place that I really like, and I'm pretty good at what I do, I think. And so making that decision to leave was a little more sticky, but
I see.
Ultimately great. And I was encouraged by other colleagues who had done Peace Corps, who definitely said, you know, professionally, you should definitely stay with us, but personally, you should probably go get this experience because there's nothing like it. But actually, my first year in Charlottesville, because I told you I was only planning to stay for 1 year, in the beginning, I applied for a Fulbright to Morocco, and I didn't get it.
Okay.
But it all came full circle eventually.
So what made you pick Morocco? And did you pick Morocco in your Peace Corps application?
So for Fulbright, I think I wanted to go to a place where I could learn Arabic, and Morocco was that place. I think going to Jordan would have required some formal Arabic study, which I didn't have. And so Morocco was it. And then for Peace Corps, you know, I ironically had applied I had submitted an application. I applied for Peace Corps 3 times. The first, you know, I was accepted and I ended up withdrawing my application. The second was the first time that Peace Corps had changed the system where you could select where you wanted to go. And you know, you can select the top 3. So I selected, I don't know, Jordan, Morocco, and some I think maybe El Salvador, because I spoke Spanish a lot better then than I do now. And it didn't work out for a lot of reasons. Come to find out, Peace Corps had pulling out of Jordan.
Yeah.
Morocco skipped a cohort that year, which I didn't know. I just thought they didn't want me because I didn't have the Arabic language. And then the next time, I didn't apply for any Arabic-speaking places. I only applied for French and Spanish-speaking places. Was supposed to go to Ecuador, and was preparing to go to Ecuador. Yeah. And a month out, there was a really devastating earthquake there, killed 1,000 people. They canceled our cohort, and I was reassigned to Morocco.
Yeah,
which comes full circle. But it's
so you made your way to Morocco. Mm-hmm. Sorry, I see.
Yeah, somehow.
Yeah. So you made your way to Morocco, and tell us where you served.
A town called El Minzel. It means the home, the house.
And it's in the Fez region.
Mm-hmm. It's an hour from Fez.
An hour from Fez. And when you look back at those 2 years, what stands out most in your mind? What can you draw strength from those 2 years? What made you most happy or proud, or what was most gratifying?
Well, you say that, and I feel like when I think about those 2 years, the thing I think about most was how happy and content I was, and how calm and relaxed I felt for the most part. Generally speaking, felt very happy and not stressed. I felt like I was coming out of a situation where I was, probably working to the point of burning out previously, and then arrived in Morocco and felt very, not stressed, the opposite of stressed, for the most part. And just remember, the people. And, I was in El Minzel just a few days ago, visiting for the first time in 6 months because of quarantine. And I had friends there, real friends, and people who, loved me and still love me, and I love them. And it just felt so wonderful to be able to have that kind of relationship with, people from, the other side of the world.
When you were, after those 2 years, did you know that you weren't quite done? That there was some more you wanted to give, or that Morocco you wanted it still to be part of your life?
Yeah, and that was kind of a surprise for me, because in the beginning, again, I came in thinking 2 years and Safi, that's it, that's all I need. And from then I'll go to the next country and then the next country. But when I was coming to close service, I was just very clearly not ready. I think I told you a couple of days ago, I cried a lot when we closed service, and very unexpectedly. I hadn't been a mess up until that point, but when it happened and I stamped out and signed my name in the book, I just lost it. And it's no, I'll be back. At that point in time,
when you stood outside, what? Say again what you said. I couldn't hear that part. When you stood outside, you mean you're leaving and waving goodbye? In that moment?
No. So at Peace Corps, that's a funny question. I'll get to that. So in Peace Corps, at the end of service, there's this tradition where, and we did this in 4 different groups because we're such a big class. But kind of your final moments of Peace Corps, after you do all of your medical and everything, is you sign out and you stamp your name in a book, and you beat on a drum that they have at the Peace Corps office, and that means you're a returned Peace Corps volunteer. And so when I was signing my name and stamping out, I just came out. And I was hey, yeah, so I'm very clearly not ready.
What a ritual. What folklore. Is that beating the drum thing?
There's a bone, this bone, I don't know the bone of what, and this big drum right on it.
Oh my goodness.
To beat it and then I guess hand it off to the next person. But
does that relate to Moroccan culture in some way? I never heard of that.
I don't know where it came from. In Georgia, for my second service, we rang a bell.
Yeah. And so what did you immediately do after so you closed the service? Where did you go right after Peace Corps?
Well, I went home for 2 months, And then in preparation for second service in the Republic of Georgia. So I was a Peace Corps response volunteer for 6 months and lived in Tbilisi, the capital. And I worked with an NGO there that is leading the fight against domestic and gender-based
Right. And that's when we met.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
I met as which is the only way we've ever met, which is over online.
So this will come full circle for you. So my friend Hannah introduced us.
Oh, yes.
So Hannah was an intern of ours at the IRC, and that's how I know her. She was a UVA intern for 2 years.
It's amazing.
And then we left
because we worked with her, and she referred us to you.
Yep.
That's amazing. And then you were just so supportive when the legal aid program in Fez was really just an idea. That's when you came on, and it was a successful experience in Mohammedia, but something we wanted to replicate in Fez. And so now I see. Now
it all makes sense now, right?
Right.
We just needed to have an hour-long conversation live on air.
Yeah. Okay. How important was it to you to now? I mean, obviously, you had passion and care about the issue of migrants and being as, bringing justice to such a difficult situation, and that's been something that's followed you, but would you have taken the same job in another country? Meaning, how important was it to you to come back to Morocco and be of service to the country again?
It was very important. Very important. I just didn't feel like I was finished, and I still have, connections here. I think I told you the first time we ever had a conversation, I felt like when I left, I was at the top of my game. Like I had the networks, I had the language. It was like the 2 years was just preparing me for something else.
Yeah.
And then it ends,
Yeah. I never quite described it or heard it described as that. I was at the top of my game, but that's how I felt at my COS. I felt like, I'm just starting. Now I know how many liters a cow could produce in a day. I just got, come on, I need to use that information.
Well, I was told that by one of the primary school principals. My last day in my site as a Peace Corps volunteer, I went around with the new Peace Corps volunteer who was replacing me in my site, and I used it as kind of a day. We went to I think there are 6 or 8 primary schools. It's kind of a big site, 10,000 people. We went to all the primary schools for me to say goodbye and to introduce them to the new volunteer. And they said, "You're leaving? But you finally got to a place where you could actually be helpful."
Yeah,
You're like, you need 10 years here. 10 years just to learn the language, another 2 to become super integrated in the community, and another 6 to do good work. I'm like, 10 years is maybe a big commitment for a volunteer, but he's not wrong. I mean, this is...
there's something sort of eternal or, something really true about that theme that we never get to enjoy the arrival. We never get to feel the reward. And just when we are able to swim, we need to go to another pool or ocean or, and sort of learn a new tide. Yeah. And it hurts. It's always sort of like, if only I could have basked in that feeling, of being in stride or unison or something like that, that comfort.
That's kind of how I felt in Georgia. I kind of always had this idea of like, okay, I'll go and do Peace Corps. I'll see if I like living overseas. I did. So I was like, okay, I feel like I'm made for this. I can keep going and going to other places and working in other countries. So I did my second service in the Republic of Georgia, which I'm eternally grateful for. But I remember being there and thinking, wow, I'm starting all over again. I don't know anybody. I don't know the Georgian language. like I feel like I need to be in a place that is home, whether that's home or whether that's Morocco, like second home.
Yeah.
Home,
Yeah.
place where you're not starting from scratch again.
Yeah. So you mentioned, Katie, that after your close of service as a volunteer, you did, you went to Peace Corps response, and you were, I'm wondering about those 2 months back at home. Really quickly, how did it feel those 2 months back home in Louisiana right after your close of service?
It's interesting because I thought I felt fine. I mean, I'm sure I was very different behavior-wise. I would like to hear that more so from like my friends and family's point of view, because I think I was maybe a bit more mellow. I'm already a pretty mellow person, but like even more mellow. There was quite a bit of reverse culture shock in terms of the way people in Louisiana, including my family, like to spend their holidays and free time, which is maybe not exactly how people in Morocco spend it. So being very cryptic. I remember feeling very calm and very happy to be back and spending time with family and friends. And I was very intentional about visiting people. Very intentional about visiting people and spending time with people, lots of one-on-one conversations. But then after the conversations, people would be like, "Are you okay? You just seem different." And I was like, "I'm fine. I'm like living my life." Until later that I was like, I think I was grieving. I think I was grieving over my service and over Morocco, and I just didn't recognize that.
Yeah, yeah. They call the I think it's $5,000 or $6,000 a volunteer will receive after service, and they call it a readjustment allowance. And I really feel it's appropriately named, and surprising. Oh, what do you mean readjustment allowance? I'll take the allowance, but I'm fine with the readjustment part. But no, I mean, there's something true about that. There is a readjustment, and and it surprised me to the extent it was for me living in the mountains, and never shaking a woman's hand, and then suddenly, you have to shake someone's hand. It's almost, I remember just having to get bearings again on just basic, what's etiquette here is not etiquette there, and what, vice versa, and just sort of figuring it all out. I want to ask you this. So you said after your close of service as a Peace Corps volunteer, you didn't feel quite done. And you've been back in Morocco after your Peace Corps response experience. It's not quite a year, but are we at 10 months or so? Is it a year? Somewhere we're approaching the year.
Almost a year.
Almost a year. How are we doing, or how are you doing on that feeling of, I certainly hope you're not feeling done. I beg you, please don't feel that. But in terms of that, that inner satisfaction and that sense of, completion or giving the best you can or fulfillment, or what I'm getting at, how is that, how are you approaching on that doneness feeling or that completion or deep satisfaction feeling? Is your current experience making inroads in the direction you wanted to go?
Well, I think my current experience over the past year has definitely helped me to kind of marry these skill sets that weren't utilized as much in Peace Corps with, the knowledge or the networks, the skills that I gained in Peace Corps. So it's definitely been good for marrying them together for an ultimate good. That sure we're seeing in the short term, but what I hope will grow to become bigger and bigger and more impactful in the future. And that's just not something that we're able to necessarily see yet at this moment in time. But that I feel pretty confident, will continue to grow to be impactful. Like the goal is to offer so many people access to pro bono legal aid, whether they're migrants finding themselves here in Fez and in Morocco, whether they're Moroccan families that need, some counsel legally. I think it has the potential to make a really big splash. But it's getting there.
Yeah.
So.
You said it, and again, it's one of those things that you said in a way that I didn't, I can identify with, but I didn't never quite heard it said that way. But let me say that again, in that first prior interview, is what he said, what you're saying, which is that you're able to, with the support and the program and with the partners and with the, the students and with, all the sort of arrangement that you've stepped into and all your capacities that you bring to it, you're able to reach further, or it's a marrying of, or you call it a marrying of, I guess what I'm getting at is, are you gaining the kind of satisfaction because you're able to get, be in a structure or in a partnership or in relationships and the support system in order for you to be able to apply your capacities even more than you were able to as a volunteer?
Basically, yeah, I think, I mean, I loved being a volunteer, but I think, yeah, there are restrictions in kind of what you can do and should do. And as much as I miss being a volunteer and I love it, I do feel like coming back and being kind of in this kind of role, able to potentially make a larger impact.
Yeah. You know what? Let me ask it like this, and this will be my last question. What's the best part about coming back and, trying to benefit Morocco again?
This is the one question you should have sent me ahead of time. Everything else has been fine. The best part about it, well, again, and this year has been so unusual because of COVID and quarantine, but I think that it's possible that once things, I don't want to say get back to some kind of normalcy, but I think there is potential, for example, for the projects and working on here now in Fez can affect the communities that I was a part of during my Peace Corps service. Like, my Peace Corps site was just an hour from Fez, which we're now growing this program. We're hoping to expand it. And I really think a lot of people, for example, in my site, this is very personal, but I think that they could benefit from such programming, and I think that they would enjoy that kind of partnership with the Hayat Liz Foundation. So that hasn't necessarily manifested yet, but I think it's a really great possibility if we ever want to talk about expanding into El Menzo.
Yeah, but how about you within you? I know that's a sort of programmatic goal and objective, and inshallah we'll get there. But in your own sense of self or within your own heart and mind, what's been the best part about the return?
Well, I don't know, I feel like I would have to think about that more and write out a blog on this, which maybe I'll be asked to do. But I think it is also that, like, I can kind of like how it was in Peace Corps, whenever, I kind of proved to myself, like, oh, I can do this. It wasn't just me hyping, making this big hype about this, and then I arrive and it's bad and I want to go home and I'm not good at this. But like coming back the second time, it's very, very different from Peace Corps and a bit of an adjustment in itself, especially having been outside of Morocco for the 9 months before coming back. But just the fact that I can live pretty independently here, I just feel, I don't think proud, but I don't know, kind of, like even 5 years ago, I'd have been like, wow, she learned Arabic. She can do this, like get by independently and, contribute to an organization that has these wonderful goals for these wonderful people in this wonderful place. That's a reality, so it feels kind of in a way like, not like I've achieved full potential. What is full potential? But like I didn't ignore the things that I wanted out of like life or career, you know, like in a sense, yeah, I've arrived where I need to be right now, you know. And so
Well, I'll take that. I mean, give me that feeling. I've arrived where I need to be right now. That's
right now.
yeah. But the right now just passed.
Tomorrow something different.
That's right. Boy, we need a lot of right nows to make it last, don't we? We got to string those right nows together. So we're going to let it. We're going to thank you, Katie, for sharing and allowing us to and entering into this conversation without a single shred of indication of what it's going to be like.
No idea.
So being brave and you know, rolling with the experience with us, with me, and trusting that, you know, we'll just talk about life. And so I'm happy to say that next Wednesday we're going to have a conversation with Thomas Anderson, a former Peace Corps volunteer, a former Marine, now an associate provost at a university in Vermont, and just a really dear friend of myself, a former chair of the board of directors of the High Atlas Foundation. You would figure that would come in, you know, that point would come in sooner. But Katie, again, I mean, I enjoyed this. I learned a lot. I now know who my colleague is.
After all this time.
You know, or now I know now all the bits are integrated into a story. And so I thank you for that. And thank you everyone for listening. I don't know if there are questions or not. Does anyone, is Muley Hassan still there? Is Sana there? Anyone want to say anything? Katie, you want to say anything before we sign off?
There are a couple of questions, but maybe.
Oh, you see the questions.
I just looked on my phone. We can.
Okay, give us one, Katie, or just Muley Hassan last time I just sort of streamed through.
Well, they're kind of the same question, but exact opposite. So one, and I think I can only see some of the comments, not all of them, but one of them is, and again, I don't know that I want to answer this on air, but Katie, what is the most things did you hate in Morocco?
Oh.
So I don't, yeah. There are tricky things, but
yeah.
And then the other is, what's the things that you like in Morocco? Which is, they're both important questions, but we can always save them for later.
Yeah. Go ahead, Boule.
Sorry to interrupt. How about your favorite food, Moroccan food?
All right, there's a good one.
Love Moroccan food. Love Moroccan people, love Moroccan music. Gnawa is my favorite type of music. Rafisa, best food in the world, maybe except for gumbo. Yeah, lots of good things. The diversity in the landscape, the way I feel like I'm revisiting a past life when I visit the douars. Yeah, it's a great place.
And what are the things that are similar between, you know, Morocco and the U.S.?
Okay, this should be a very simple question. Well, I think, you know, we're all humans and we all want the same things at the end of the day, ultimately. You know, family is important. We all want what's best for our families and our communities. So, like, basic values, for sure. I think part of the reason why I really love hanging out in rural Morocco is because it makes me feel really nostalgic. I think from my childhood when I would hang out with my great grandma and she would make me cucumber tomato salad and then serve this very, very sweet root beer, just as sweet as Moroccan mint tea.
Was it cold?
And then watch. Yeah, it's cold.
The root beer was on ice?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
She had the round pitcher. Yeah.
Sounds amazing.
And we would watch probably some kids shows, but also like daytime soap operas all day, which is also very similar to how I've spent a lot of time during the summers in Morocco. So, yeah.
That's nice.
It is. It's nostalgic.
Well, do you want to say, well, what is gumbo?
Gumbo is probably the most famous food of Louisiana and something that I eat as much of as I can when I go back home. It's probably like the first and last thing I eat. And it's essentially a soup. It's like a brown soup that's made from a roux. And a roux is just kind of this chemical mixture of flour and oil that's heated for at least an hour over the stove and stirred tediously.
Have you ever put oyster dressing on gumbo?
Oh, you can put oysters in a gumbo, but not
Did you ever
oysters.
put oyster dressing on that cucumber and tomato salad?
That's like almost blasphemous what you're saying right now.
All right.
You eat oyster dressing by itself. Maybe you can put it on like a slice of French bread, like baguette.
That sounds nice. That sounds nice. All right. Are you hungry, by the way, right now?
No, but I have a feeling you might be.
Yeah, I am. I have a little piece of pizza with some anchovy on it with olive oil, and I'm going to go out, no cheese. And so anyway, I shouldn't have gotten into that. But anyway, Mule, thank you. Katie, it's been a great experience. Tom Anderson next Wednesday. And thank you, everyone, for listening and sharing this time with us. All the best to everyone I see and whoever hears us. Take care of yourselves. Thank you, Katie.
Yeah. Thanks, Yossef. Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.